Uh, okay, we are all kind of a bit perplexed. Sorry, sir. But before you start your session, would the Department of Fine Arts and Design, Sister Nivedita University, will be privileged to felicitate you. Can I request our HUD ma'am and Assistant Dean sir and Assistant Registrar Shoma ma'am to be on stage and felicitate our guest of honor today. Can we have a huge round of applause for all of them, please? Sir, the stage is yours now. Sir, with this, you can change the, this is the next slide and this is the previous one.
Okay, right.
And I think this height is, I think this height is good for you.
Yeah, one second, yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to be here, especially as I'm not really from the art history or artist background. It was already introduced that I'm really a civil servant. I'm doing a lot of research with about early Indians in Edinburgh, and because of that we came across Van Bose here towards the end of the lecture. I explain how we came across him. How is the sound? Yes, everybody can hear me? Yep, good, perfect. Yeah, so great thank you also for Shanjoy and for Shoma for getting me in here. It was a sort of chance meeting in Boral at a temple restoration where we got to meet each other and we got chatting, and I was invited to come here for a lecture. So the other thing about the lecture is that it's work in progress. There's a big centenary coming up for Van Bose, his death centenary in August, and we are working up research for that. So please bear with me if not everything is nailed down yet. For not every question we've got an answer. Some of them we might never have found, might never find out anything, but there's quite a lot of open questions, which is one of the interesting things about Van Bose. But we have learned an awful lot more in the last few years than we ever knew about him before. So I think it's well worth sharing. But like I say, bear in mind, I'm not an artist, so if there is sharp intakes of breaths from the actual artist in the room and from the art historians, I'll take that with the humility I deserve. Yes, Van Bose, part of our Early Indians in Edinburgh series. This is part 2. Sorry. Is this one? Huh?
Yeah, this.
Where do I point it at? Oh, maybe there. Sorry about that. Gives you a bit more chance to see the picture of Edinburgh Castle. And there's a picture of Van Bose already on the side. And there's a very, you see, with a red turban, seeing right in the middle amongst the soldiers, there's one of our earliest depictions of an Indian in Edinburgh, which might actually be the artist model John Mungo, which we've written about as well. Yeah, the Edinburgh in India project. Here's Professor Emeritus now, Roger Jeffrey, and quite a lot younger picture of me. We've been doing it for quite a while. We've got quite a lot of publications out of the subject of anything to do in colonial times, relationship between Edinburgh and wider India, meaning everything of the East India Company area, basically everything between Port Said and Portland, Oregon, the whole Indo-Pacific region, which was under the East India Company, and how that impacted back in Edinburgh. That's our research topic for 12, 13, 14 years now. Previously, part one was about Anna Turkut, Maharashtrian, who was the English tutor for Rabindranath Tagore before he went off to study in England. He stayed in Mumbai for a while with her, and she is, some people say, the inspiration for Nalini in Tagore's poems. And she had a sad end in Edinburgh, and we investigated that. That lecture is actually still available on YouTube as well. But yeah, going into Fanindranath, both, there's all sorts of spellings. You know, when we started off the research, there was quite a lot of confusion even about his name and his birth date and everything. But yeah, the quick rundown is he went to art school here in Calcutta, then he went on to art schools in Edinburgh. A couple of them he studied with or worked with Auguste Rodin in Paris, which greatly influenced him. He spent some time in India, especially in Baroda, Lakshmi Vilas Palace. He did quite a bit of work in the garden and the statues there. He did famously turn down an invitation to work on the Victoria Memorial at the time. We don't know quite why, but he turned it down. He then married a Scottish lady, settled down in Scotland, had a studio there, worked on a variety of war memorials, which a lot of sculptors did after the First World War. That was a big demand, war memorials. And he was the first Indian, probably the first non-white person to become an associate of the RSA, the Royal Scottish Academy of Arts and Architecture. And then just a year after, he sadly died, less than 40 years old. A very early death, sadly, which cut his very, very promising career short and left us with a lot of open questions, a lot of what-ifs. Yeah, he was a rising star. Some people say he was the first modern Indian sculptor. He was certainly the most recognized Indian sculptor in Europe. And that is one of the main things to say about him. That he's got a couple of important works, which some of them we'll be seeing during the lecture. Boy in Pain, The Hunter, we've already seen at the first bit. Snake Charmer, we're going to see, and his St. John the Baptist, which we're going to see, which even he himself might never have seen. Born, for a while there was talk that he was born 1st of January, either 88 or 1889 in Calcutta. We know better now. He is from near Dhaka, Bikrampur, just the pointy bit south of Dhaka. His father very likely was a magistrate in the Indian civil service, Taranath Bose. We don't know yet what rest of family is, whether he was first child, second child, whether he had any sisters, things like that. We also don't know how long he stayed there. He just was born there, and then his father's happens in the civil service, was transferred on. We don't know about that. What we do know, that's why childhood ends quite quickly. He very soon becomes a student. And already age 14, 1902, he is a student here in Calcutta. He studies, a bit unclear where he studies, Calcutta School of Art, it said. More people say it's a Jubilee Art Academy, which is interesting for us. Some people say he studied in both. He started at one, went to the other. It's a bit unclear. The records of those days are not very well preserved. But it is fairly sure that for some time at least he was in the Jubilee Art Academy, which is very decisive for his career and for his art later on. Because the Jubilee Art Academy had broken away from the government school of art. It was a third-year art student, I think, who set it up himself, Ranada Prasad Gupta, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, and they wanted to break away from traditional Indian art, which they felt was increasingly forced upon them by the government art school. The government art school and Ernest Binfield Havel, they wanted to go more back to Indian roots. The Neo-Bengal school, as they call here, Abanindranath Tagore, a good example, big proponent of that. And there are many young students who said, no, we just want to be amazing, good artists. We want to learn modern styles, modern techniques. We're not against portraying Indian subjects. We are not denying in any way that we're Indians, but we want to be up with the world standard in art. We don't want to be pushed back into some sort of folk art, art and crafts, government emporium kind of style. We want to do something else. And they set up their own school, which was the Jubilee Art Academy. And to see what came out of that, there's some examples here. There's a picture, Mother and Child, by Rana Prasad Gupta, which is very much in the realistic style. It's not a perfect work of art. It's something which he used to teach his students. It's a sort of model for his students to discuss amongst themselves, to discuss with him. And one of the famous alumni from the art school is Hemendranath Majumdar, obviously a very popular, very commercially very successful artist. Again, Indian subjects, no denying that this is Indian, but style-wise, it's not in the style of Kalighat, it's not Jamini Roy, it's not Abanindranath Tagore. It's definitely the way one would have done worldwide, world modern art at the time. After that, did he go to the Calcutta School of Art? Did he go before? We don't know. What we do know is he's in Kolkata not for very long. He's only there 2 years, 1902 to 1904, because by the time he's 16, he's still only 16, remember, he gets on the ship to Europe to further his art education in Italy at first. He tries to get into Italian art academies. He's not successful with that. He tries to get into the Royal College of Art. I mean, you have to admire his ambition as a 16-year-old from India to go, can I please go to the Royal College of Art? Sadly, they say no. But he does manage to go to the Edinburgh School of Art on the Mount, a very nice building you can see on the bottom there. Since 1826, they've been going there. You can tell from the name of the Edinburgh School of Art, the Trustees Academy, it's sometimes called the Board of Manufacturers School of Art of Edinburgh, that it's part of this 19th century movement where industry churns out a lot of stuff, and people are surprised how terribly ugly a lot of these industrial products are. And things like the Victoria and Albert Museum, where artists are brought in, artists are trained up to partly work on product designs, to make industrial processes like bronze casting, for instance, metalworking work from an artistic point of view, to get more beauty back into industry. Because there was obviously the Industrial Revolution, 19th century, huge amount of stuff was put out, a lot of it done by engineers, no offense to engineers, but the first idea is not on the looks of things, so they're bringing artists in, and this Edinburgh School of Art was part of that movement. And anyway, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Edinburgh, the central belt of Scotland, is a big industrial area for the world at the time. Now he goes into 1906, a year after he joins, he goes into the life school, and he is very successful. Again, drawing from life is something he already got from Gupta in the Jubilee Academy, that you have to not go for ideals, you have to see what's actually in front of you, what's realistic, and that's what you have to portray back at people. That's what art is about, to realistically portray life, to bring real life back to the people in an artistic way. And life drawing is one of his major things all his career. And right the year after he joins the life school, he already wins the prestigious Stewart Prize. That's the Royal Scottish Academy gives that prize once a year. He's a joint winner for the best figure drawing. And he's just a first-year student, and he gets that prize. One of his contemporaries is George Henry Paulin. There's a picture of him here. And one of his finest work over in Glasgow, that's King Robert of Sicily. I'm going to show artworks not just by Fanindranath Bose, I'm going to show his contemporaries, predecessors, etc. as well, to show what kind of colleagues he had, what kind of people he collaborated with, who his teachers were, how they influenced him, and also, sadly, to some extent, what his contemporaries went on to do in their later life, which is something he sadly couldn't do because he died young. But this is a magnificent, very muscular work of his colleague Henry Paulin, who was one of his contemporaries in the life class. Now, again, with artists, there is this conundrum. What are you going to do? Are you going to go more into design, commercial art, or are you going to do art for art's sake? And I think the Edinburgh School of Art reached that point in 1908 when the art for art's sake people really wanted to do art and not go into the commercial world, set up their own college, which was the Edinburgh College of Art, not the Edinburgh School of Art now, the Edinburgh College of Art in 1908. And Bose is one of the first students there. He joins up nice buildings that are still in use in Edinburgh. By 1911, we also know where he lives, in 47 Forest Road in Edinburgh. There's a picture there underneath. And quite surprising, that's right opposite where I used to live in Edinburgh when I first came to Edinburgh, so that house is quite familiar to me. Interesting also, he's living as a lodger, obviously being a student. But he's not the only Indian in the flat. There's altogether 4 Indians, 2 medical students, Pratul Ghosh and Ambat Menon, and there's even a law student as well, Gopal Pillai. So he's 4 Indians sharing a flat together with the landlady and her children and a servant. Again, he usually comes first in class in the Edinburgh College, so he's really a first class topper here. He receives awards from Sir George Frampton, from Sir William Goscombe John, a very, very important man in his life. He's got a good teacher in Percy Portsmouth, and those are serious teachers here. That's his teacher here, Percy Portsmouth. Here, some examples of his work we can see here. Some of it you can see how he's been inspired by that for his own work. Sir George Frampton here, a picture by his wife of him, and his very famous Sir George Frampton, if you're ever in London, he's very famous for the Peter Pan statue. You can see there. But he also did more modern-looking work here, sort of in the 1920s, very popular, these multicolored, multi-material sculptural work, which he got into a bit. Sir William Goscombe John, he is a person we're going to talk quite often about because he had a big influence on Fanindranath Bose. Both artistically, we can see a few things here which work out, but also because he was a mentor and a patron for him. He bought some of his work, he publicized his work, he got him connections for further work and things like that. And William Goscombe John is also very interested in the world outside Europe. There's a picture here of a pygmy chieftain, which he saw at a sculpture here, a bust which he saw at a colonial exhibition. Back in those days, it was a big thing to get colonial native tribes, so to speak, and display them in kind of zoo-like exhibitions in Europe. And there was something from the Belgian Congo going on in Brussels, and that's where he, from life, sculpted this chieftain here. He also came to Kolkata, and you can see some of the artwork in Kolkata, Goscombe John's artwork here. If you look over the fence at Flagstaff House in Barrackpore, where they've parked all the old Maidan colonial statues, you can see Lord Minto here on his horse, turning the back to us. Lord Minto, by the way, also an Edinburgh man who had his Edinburgh house not far from the art school. He was Minto Morley reforms, you know that from history, teaching about more freedom of the press and all these things. What you also notice on the plinth of the equestrian statue, it is rather Public Works Department paint on naked brick, which doesn't really look suitable. And the fact it wasn't always that way, there were some magnificent bronze panels here. And what happened to them is they were taken off because Lady Minto wanted to have them taken off, and she donated them to the Victoria Memorial because she thought they'd be nicer there. So if you want to see them, they're very accessible. They are round the bottom of the Queen Victoria statue in front of the Victoria Memorial. So that is Goscombe John work. They are very colonial, lots of people with turbans, lots of flags, lots of sepoys, lots of howdahs. It's a very colonial piece, which is very fitting for the Queen Victoria statue, naturally. That's why, in the end, it ended up there. But yeah, he definitely had an interest in India, had a knowledge of India, so he was one of the reasons he was interested in having an actual Indian at the college in Fanindranath Bose. Yes, already 1909, so he is, 1905, he started studying in Edinburgh, so that's 4 years he's now at Edinburgh. He's got his first exhibition at the Royal Scottish Academy, and its subject is Daedalus and Icarus, the famous Greek saga where Icarus is building himself wings to fly towards the sun. His father Daedalus is trying to discourage him, and in the end Icarus flies up. So the wings are so successful, he gets to the sun, and then the wings melt, the wax and the wings melt because the sun is too hot, and he falls and dies. And here we can see the wings being put on Icarus. This is not the actual work, this is the sort of plaster cast model of it, or rather photo of the plaster cast model of it. Many of Fanindranath's actual work we are not in possession of, but we have recently come into possession of quite a lot of photos of the work, which is a great help for our research. Yeah, this is 1909, so this is quite realistic, nothing Indian about it at all, just a good solid work of craftsmanship, especially for a fourth-year student. 1911, he gets his certificate. He should have, to be honest, he should have gotten it in 1910, but there was some administrative hiccup with crossing T's and dotting I's, so he only got it in 1911. Again, it's only 23, and it's a beautiful work of art itself, the diploma. And yeah, you can see in big red letters, Fanindranath Bose completed the course in sculpture. He was one of 2 students at that year who got the degree. So it was not a huge amount of people who were trained there. He was one of the very few, and still one of the best. Yes, a mystery here. Glasgow, the unknown Glasgow time of Fanindranath Bose. There is a Fanindranath Bose born, it says, on the 1st of May 1889, studying at the University of Glasgow at the same time. And he's not even studying art, he's studying naval architecture. He's a shipbuilding engineer. And he's not just doing it on the side, by the looks. After 4 years, what you need at a Scottish university till you get your bachelor's degree, he gets a BSc from the University of Glasgow. Quite interesting. He's staying in Glasgow as well. He's got a flat in Glasgow, while we've got the address 1911 for the other guy. Or maybe it's the same guy in Edinburgh. We've got another address here for him in Glasgow, again as a lodger. Now, are they the same? Now, my wife says, yes, they are definitely the same, and there's a lot of similarities, the nose, the eyes. Remember, there's 15 years between the pictures, and as a man, you can lose a lot of hair in 15 years. So it may be the same person. Personally, the mouth is slightly different, and the sort of prominent earlobes on the younger man, they're not quite there, but then again, maybe the photographer has taken them off a bit. You know, photos were often edited a wee bit in those days even. It's difficult to say whether they're the same. It's odd for them to have 2 addresses, 1911, but then again, if he's studying in both towns, he might have a bed sit in both. Very odd. Also, art and naval engineering, maybe he was looking for, in case the art didn't work out, to have a serious career. Difficult to say. He goes on traveling because at the end of his student days, he gains a travel scholarship from the Edinburgh College of Art and the Bengal government. Quite a substantial amount of money, £100, which depending how you, I mean, that's about a third of the price of a decent house in Edinburgh at the time. So from that point of view, it's about £100,000 today. Buying food is about £15,000, but it's not bad for a student to go traveling. It's £15,000 to £100,000, and he gets it both from the Edinburgh College of Art and from the Bengal government. One of the open questions is, what was his relation to the Bengal government? We know at the time Lord Minto, he is from Edinburgh. His wife, certainly we don't know what his attitude to art is, but certainly his wife was interested in art enough. She knew Goscombe John. Goscombe John very much knew Fanindranath Bose. So there might be a Lord Minto collection there. Lord Minto Viceroy. Remember in those days the Viceroys weren't in Delhi, they were still here in Kolkata. Andrew Fraser, Sir Andrew Fraser, Governor of Bengal at the first partition, again an Edinburgh man. Again, I don't know his attitude to art, but I've seen his gravestone in Dean Cemetery in Edinburgh, and it's, even after 100 years, it's still one of the most modernist gravestones in the entire cemetery. So somebody in his family must have had an interest in modern art, if it wasn't himself even. And then you've got Lord Carmichael Hall, Carmichael Medical College, Carmichael College. He was very much, again, a governor of Bengal. He was very much into education. Again, he was an Edinburgh man, housed in Queen Street. He was very into Indian art. Lord Carmichael had a huge collection of Indian art, which, if you ever want to see it, it's somewhere between the coast of Portugal and the Azores at the bottom of the Atlantic, because sadly the ship transporting it back to the UK got torpedoed by the Germans in the First World War, so thousands of artworks went down there. It's a great loss to Indian art history. Lord Carmichael was also very interested in modern art. If you see his summer house south of Edinburgh, it's very arts and crafts, lots of interesting metalwork. Again, a metalworker like Fanindranath Bose. Did they know each other? Would be odd if they didn't. If they would have known each other, I think they would have gotten on very well. And all these people are, people who've got influence who might give a bit of money to a promising Bengali student in their hometown of Edinburgh. Anyway, he's got time to continue with Percy Portsmouth, SEACA, and he goes traveling in Europe. By September 1911, he reaches Paris, a big city for sculpture. He makes pencil drawings. His drawings are some of the best works. I mean, he's a very good sculptor, but he's also a very, very good draftsman. And to be a good sculptor, you have to be a good draftsman, to learn from previous sculptors, to see exactly the details of this. He's got an enormous eye for detail, and he's supposedly also very quick. Most of his sketches are done in 10, 15 minutes. He is amazingly quick and still amazingly good quality. Does he go to the cathedrals? He's very interested in medieval art. People in those days are trying to get away from the Greeks and the Romans a little bit and also branch out, especially the realists, into the much more realistic, much more showing pain, much more showing bodily dysfunctions, bodily disabilities and so on, which medieval art was very good at, because obviously there's the sacrifice of Jesus as martyrdom depicted in medieval sculpture. So there was a big interest in that. Whether he actually went to these cathedrals, probably not, because the angle from which he took his things, medieval cathedrals are very tall, and to really get up close to the sculptures, you really need scaffolding or very, very long ladders. So very likely he's done them in museums in Paris. He also went to Italy. Obviously, every artist loves Italy. Remember, he originally wanted to go to Italy as a 16-year-old, so now he manages to get to Rome, Florence, Naples, all great artistic cities. He keeps sketchbooks. His sketchbooks are one of his greatest works of art. He has 4 big sketchbooks, which we've got at the RSA, Royal Scottish Academy in Edinburgh, and they are substantial, 70, 60, 40 pages, sorted by subjects, architecture, medieval, classical, and a pocket bone for quick sketches, and they are a delight to see. Saying, for instance, here's the cathedral sketches. Like I say, they're probably from casts, but still they are amazingly good. Amiens, Reims, Amiens. And remember, this is kind of 10, 15 minutes work for him. He done 17th century one. He went out to the Palace of Versailles near Paris. He did these ones, Le Hongre, Le Gendre. Some Italian work here, very likely. We're not entirely sure where it is from, but looks very, this is more classical. It's not that he ignored the classics. And he also went into contemporary sculpture. He didn't just copy from the ancients, he actually actively took life classes. Antoine Bourdelle, for instance, he attended his college. Antoine Bourdelle is interesting because A, he was very good at life classes and he had a very good connection to Auguste Rodin. He did the parks in Paris, Jardin du Luxembourg, Carpeau's Fontaine de l'Observatoire. It's an amazing artwork which had come up not so long ago in the 1870s. Merci, Marie-Jean Antonin Merci, he works on small figurist statues, which is one thing which Van Indernaert Boos excels in later life, the small statues. He's not a man for huge, big statues or big fountains like Carpeau, but he excels in the small work. And obviously, yeah, Auguste Rodin is a big draw to Paris for all sculptors in those days. Everybody knew Rodin, and everybody hoped Rodin knew them. Yeah, life classes here. Again, the emphasis is on realism here in Bourdelle's life class drawings, 1911 we are now. This is a fountain or parts of the fountains, again his sketches. He looks at other new art here, Alfred Boucher, Au But, to the finishing line, where you see a couple of young men racing along just about at the finishing line, which he done a very good sketch capturing the movement in the statue. Again, very much about capturing movement, the realist movement in sculpture. And yes, Auguste Rodin, a big chapter in his life. Some people he studied with Auguste Rodin, probably not, but he certainly was in contact. We don't know quite how much contact, but it went on for at least 3 years on and off. He got inspired by him. He learned from him. That's why he became part of the new sculpture movement. There were lots. He wasn't the only one who was inspired by Rodin. Obviously, worldwide, artists were inspired Rodin, especially in Britain. And what's interesting to think about is that, you know, we are in 1911, 1912, 1915 here, and people are still excited about Rodin. But if you looked at the dates of some of the works I've already shown, this is 1870s, 1880s, so this is almost a generation ago this has happened. But still the British are majorly excited about all this new work in France, which effectively is 30, 40 years old, which goes to show you just how important people like Van Indernaert Boos were for British art. That British art was, to some extent so far, a generation behind French art, that they got excited by stuff the French had done 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, how excited he got, we can see here. The Age of Bronze, a major work of Rodin's here. A very good sketch. We're going to see this picture later on again. And everybody, tourist show favorite in Paris, the Kiss here. Le Baiser by Rodin, again with a very good sketch by Van Indernaert Boos on the side. Then he goes off to India. His next chapter in life is in India. Vadodara here in Baroda, you can see him here living the life of a proper professional sculptor with a driver and a coach and a professional photographer taking his photo. He originally got an invitation to the Victoria Memorial, I said already. William Guscombe John, his patron, is involved in that, so it probably came via that, but both turned it down. We don't know why. We can guess maybe from the two statues. We've got the famous angel on top of the Victoria Memorial, and we've got one of Boos's later work, and the styles are very different. Guscombe John was also quite modern in his style, but he was quite a bit older than Van Indernaert Boos, obviously, so he could still ride Boos horses, did more traditional sculpture, which the British, especially in Calcutta, in those days people said Calcutta was always sort of 10 years behind in fashions and opinions behind mainland Britain. So Guscombe John could still service that kind of taste, whereas Boos was probably too young to too daring to really fit in with the artistic scheme of the Victoria Memorial. There might have been other reasons as well, which we can spot maybe later in his life. But yeah, also he had another very good job anyway, so he wasn't reliant on the Victoria Memorial, because the Gaekwar of Baroda was a good friend of Goscombe John, visited him quite often on his Europe trips, and he spotted in his collection a copy of The Hunter, one of the early artistic works of Anindranath Bose, and he wanted a copy of it. And he said, well, I don't just want the copy, I want the whole man. I want him to work for me. So he was recruited to Baroda as advisor to His Highness, as a court sculptor, effectively. He got quite free rein. He was told, look, you have to do 8 sculptures for my garden, Lakshmi Vilas Palace Gardens, of famous people of the history of Baroda. 2 sculptures for public exhibitions and the art gallery. We know what that is. The other ones, I haven't yet seen them or find out exactly what they are. But the other ones, Boy with Falcon and On the Way to the Temple, we know. I'm going to show some pictures in a minute of that. He was also advisor to the technical schools. They were setting up a bronze casting department at the technical school in Baroda, so he had advisor of that because he now had experience in bronze casting. And he taught at the art school, quite famous art school, even nowadays, I believe, the college there. And he did work on the side himself. And in fact, the 2 bronzes which are in the Fateh Singh and in the gallery in Baroda are the only ones outside Britain where you can actually see his work. Sadly, there's nothing here in Kolkata or anywhere else in India. You have to go there to Vadodara to see it. Yeah, this is a falconer. Not entirely sure whether they're the same falconer. One, maybe it's a photo of a model. The other one is maybe the finished object. And then again, maybe he reworked it. One of them certainly seems longer and slimmer. Maybe it's just a photo, the way the photo has been edited. But yeah, this is this famous Boy with Falcon, or the Falconer, from 1915. And we've got the very beautiful On the Way to the Temple here. Both of those are in Baroda in the art gallery. Again, Indian themes, but distinctly modern style to it, distinctly modern sculptural approach to it all. Also on Indian themes, we don't know whether he's done them in Baroda or not, but is here To the Well. Lady with a picture walking there, and the very famous snake charmer from various angles here, in various forms at plaster maquette and partly as a finished bronze object. That's a snake charmer. End of the Day, we don't know when that was done or where it was depicted. We've got already from 1911 sort of Indianish drawings here. On the way from the well, somebody with a water sack here, a boy with a water sack. And then we've got a big controversy. The Rupam controversy here, where we've got somebody saying here, so the subject is Indian, we've seen the Indian subject just now, there's nothing in it which could not come from the chisel of a non-Indian sculpture. Indeed, our grievance is that in Mr. Bose's work, we search in vain for the revelation of the Indian mind of an Indian artist, the peculiarity of his point of view, and the traditions of a great heritage. That was a big accusation thrown at him by Ordendra Kumar Ganguly in the Modern Review in May 21. That was the beginning of a big controversy which dogged his, well, never, not saying he's dogged his life, but has followed him around pretty much all his life. Was he Indian? Was he European? Was he modern? Should he be traditional? People then hit back at that controversy. Not himself, interestingly. We don't know what he himself thought about this. He never seemed to have he never stepped into this controversy. But another student here, Benoy Kumar Sharka, interesting again, a student from Paris, responds and says, look, is there such a thing as Indian, Western art, Eastern art? Are they really that irreconcilable? Is there not just art? Aren't there not universal criteria by which we can judge art, like harmony, like colors, like artistic skill, like how the artist expresses his opinions, his own urges in the work? And if that is so, if there is universal standards of art, if there's just one universal art with lots of different dialects, maybe, can artists not just freely borrow? Does an Indian artist, because he's born in India or looks like an Indian artist, does he have to be an Indian artist, or can he just be an artist? Is there any obligation for an artist from India to be an Indian artist? And Ganguly says, yes, there is. You have to, if you're an artist from India, you have to be an Indian artist. You have to do Indian art, because artistic creation, that's an expression of your country, of your race. And in India especially, he says, is in danger of losing the cultural identity because of colonialism, because of lots of foreign works come in. He says India is flooded with foreign imports. And he says, this is his words, he has to erect a tariff wall of nationalism in order to protect the Indian culture. And okay, he says, that doesn't have to always be so, but for the moment, we need the new Neo-Bengal movement, the Neo-Bengal school of art, because everybody in India, all artists in India first have to go back to their roots, strengthen Indian art, and then once that is done, then they can maybe look abroad and internationalize a bit, but not before that. And those are the two things. Is there a universal art, or is there a national art for each country, for each culture? Something which comes back to him later on in Scotland, because there's a certain lot of similarities to the Scottish art debate in those times as well. Yeah, also there's the other issue, Fanindranath Bose, how Indian is he? He left India when he was 16. Yes, he came back to the Baroda thing, but he's most of his training, apart from the Jubilee Academy, has been in Europe by Europeans. There hardly ever any. He was one of the first Indian artists to go abroad, so it's not like he had a huge amount of Indian artists in Edinburgh he could converse with. So yeah, naturally he is very European in outlook, and that's what he wanted anyway. How is that perceived back in Scotland? That's the other controversy in life. How do Scottish or British artists regard him? Is he just the exotic Indian who's going to teach us great wisdom from the East? Or is he an Indian who's coming to inexpertly copy European art? Or is he just an artist, an amazing artist, very skilled artist, and yeah, okay, originally he was born in India, but who cares? What's the attitude there? And it's difficult to tell. There's a couple of things. Does he have racist sentiments against him? Is he rejected from project because he's not British or something? We know he's not on the Scottish National War Memorial. Is it because he's Indian? Or is it because he's not Scottish? His Welsh mentor is also not on the Scottish National War Memorial, Goscombe John. Or is it simply because he is dead? Because he dies while it's being built, so they never got round to asking him. Or maybe he rejected it. He rejected the Victoria Memorial. Maybe he rejected the War Memorial as well. We know there's a chantry request for the Royal Academy, for instance, which a huge amount of money goes to the Royal Academy in London to build up a big national collection. And we know, surprisingly, he is not asked to contribute any work. It's not for buying up old work, it's for commissioning new work, the chantry request. Lots of his friends get asked. More so people down in London. It's not so many Scottish people and hardly any Irish people. So again, is it anti-Indian sentiment, or is it a pro-London sentiment again? Is he just not London enough? Is he too Scottish by now because he is RSA? He's not RA. He's Royal Scottish Academy, not Royal Academy in London. So that might be another thing works against him. Difficult to say. But yeah, and obviously it's the age of nationalism, so he is always in between the two chairs, India, Bengal, England, Scotland, Britain. There's rather a lot of chairs to sit on and fall in between in those days. The householder, yeah, but he managed to establish himself as a proper professional artist who can live of his art, and here we've got him as a young man in his mid-20s, I think, quite a while, in his early 30s actually, quite a bit after his student days. He marries. Early on he mentioned he married a Scottish lady here, 15th of April 1915, already shortly before he goes away to India again for the Baroda Commission. He marries, and it's a house they live in. His wife, haven't done quite enough research on the family yet, but she's a housekeeper to a married Mrs. Galloway, and they meet because Molly, as a housekeeper, takes the daughter of the house, Leslie, to go to Fanindranath Bose's teacher, Percy Portsmouth, as a model. The daughter is working as an artist model for Percy Portsmouth, and the housekeeper comes along as a chaperone and takes her back and forth, and obviously at the studio, Fanindranath Bose, Portsmouth, as teacher, they work together, so they will have met there. Just how much of a housekeeper she is, I'm not entirely sure, because Mrs. Galloway's family name, maiden family name, unmarried family name, is the same as a housekeeper's name. So there might be a sort of poorer niece, maybe, who she's taken in once she needed help, once her husband had died, Mrs. Galloway. Also, Mrs. Galloway is the witness at the wedding, and another witness is David Alexander Francis, another sculptor who shares a studio with Fanindranath Bose. The wedding is in a private house. It's a very small affair, but there's a war on, so there's no big wedding celebrations by the looks of it. We've got, interesting, the nameplate of the house as well. Some people, it's the nameplate from the studio, but I think it's probably from the private flat. The house they live in, we can see here, the one with the blue door, but don't fool yourself, they're not having the whole house, they're just living in flat number 9, so it's probably somewhere under the roof line, one of the two, at best 3 windows under the roof line is probably their tenants, they're not owning either. And they stay there till 1926, so that is the place, Frederick Street, quite a good address nowadays, very central in Edinburgh, in the new town. Now, obviously, artists, there's restrictions on what you can do as an artist. If you're doing watercolor, you can do it in your own flat. If you do bronze casting, your landlord is probably not so keen on you doing that on your kitchen table, so he's got his own studio. Well, he's got his own studio. He's got in a cluster of foundries and studios, about 10 minutes walk from his house in a sort of industrial village inside central Edinburgh in Dean. Very beautiful place if you're in Edinburgh. Dean Village is a very beautiful place to see. And he shares the studio there with a couple of other sculptors, John Stevenson Rind, David Alexander Francis, of whom I haven't found any work, and the quite famous Hazel Armour, one of the early female sculptors. And we can see what kind of range his studio mates had. We've got sort of Rind is by this time at the end, coming towards the end of his career. He's enormously established, especially in Edinburgh. Lots of statues in Edinburgh by Rind. Round the corner where he lives, there's this formidable looking Victoria, Empress of India, as it says on the plinth here, standing there. That's typical Rind. That's typical. That's not the sculptor Fanindranath Bose wanted to be, but that was certainly a very successful sculptor. And then you've got the other one, Hazel Armour, who's a bit younger than he is, who's sharing a studio. We've got an early work here, the girl coming from tennis by the looks, the sort of sweatband round the hair, and then some of her later work to show how her Hazel Armour style developed. Those are people who he knew personally because they were sharing studios with him. He's also having exhibitions, like I say, one he has already had as a student, but now he's actually at the London Royal Academy. He gets in quite a lot for his exhibitions. A Hunter again. Here we've got his work, The Hunter, quite one of his most famous and most accessible works in Great Britain, certainly. We've got The Boy in Pain, or Boy with Crab. If you're very, very close to the boy, has stepped on a crab down there at the bottom. On the base of the statue, there's a little crab there. That's why it's sometimes called Boy with Crab, a work from 1913, exhibited in 1917. Also very, very popular work of his, publicly viewable in Great Britain and Wales, I believe. The snake charmer, I'm not sure what happened to the snake charmer, but yeah, we've seen that before. That's at the RA and at the RSA, the Scottish Academy as well, both in London and Edinburgh, that was exhibited. Another famous work, Athlete and Hound here, 23, 24, exhibited in Scotland first and then in London. Not a very good quality picture, sorry about that, but it was literally taken on my phone at an exhibition from what was already a photo. I've never seen the original of this, the actual work. Yeah, sort of a list of his exhibitions. One of his late works here, 1925, Royal Scottish Academy, where he obviously naturally exhibits most of the stuff here, Sacrifice of Youth. So that can be seen near Edinburgh. And there's some posthumous exhibitions here, RAS 1927, he was already dead by then, of a portrait bust. I'm sadly not entirely sure which portrait bust, but we've got two portrait busts. One of them is probably it. Both very good works. Like I say, he excels in small work. He's a man of detail, and he's not huge statues on giant plinths. There's only one big work of him. Mostly he does miniatures and small statuettes, but very, very skillfully so. Other exhibitions as well here, Lang Gallery, Newcastle, sadly we don't know what he exhibited there. Patronage, yes. He was reasonably successful in getting patrons, maybe not as successful as other ones, but he had sort of James Pettendree McGillivray, who was a big name in Scottish sculpture, who put him forward to the Royal Scottish Academy, and very important, already mentioned him, is William Goscombe John, who bought the Hunter, who bought the Boy in Pain from him. Boy in Pain here again. And Goscombe John also publicizes his work. For instance, he gives his work to the National Museum, sadly not out of Edinburgh, but the National Museum of Wales, because William Goscombe John was proudly Welsh, not Scottish, so it went to a museum in Wales, sadly, rather than to a museum in Edinburgh. Yeah, the Hunter goes there, for instance, and the Boy in Pain, they can both be seen in Cardiff in the National Museum of Wales. Yes, his big success, for which he is famous, he was the first Indian to be publicly recognized by a British Artistic Academy, and that is the RASA title, which he got in 1925. Pettendree McGillivray had put him forward in 1925. Finally, a post becomes free. You have to wait for a post to be vacant, and there was the post of associate sculptor rank was free, and it went to a vote, and both managed to get 31 votes, and his challenger from Glasgow, Benno Schatz, he only got 8, so he was in. And he was, probably because he's just done quite a good work on a war memorial in Perth in central Scotland. So that probably tipped us in his balance. Yeah, and he was, again, we can see in his toast here, when he's toasted by the associates, both says, at a moment of strained relations between Britain and India, remember this is 1925, there's a lot of independence movement going on here. This honor would reassure Indians that the Scots did not wish to thwart their legitimate aspirations. And notice here, he didn't say the British, he doesn't say the English, he said the Scots, because there's a Scottish Academy, and there's especially quite a bit of rivalry, as there is between India and Britain. There's also quite a bit of rivalry between Scotland and Britain, between Scotland and England. There's a Scottish National Party which was founded around the time. There's a lot of social unrest in Scotland. There's a lot of thought about being Scottish, and he sort of points out here, at least the Scots are not against us Indians. This is kind of proof of it, or he'd like to think this is proof of it. But it certainly is a subject on his mind. We very rarely get political statements or even artistic ideological statements of him. So we have got his work, we haven't really got his thoughts in many ways. It's one of the few occasions where he says something publicly. Yes, the next chapter in his life, called The Fallen. It's monuments to the dead. We are in the time just after the First World War, and huge amounts of people have died in the First World War. Just Scotland, about 250,000 people died out of 5 million people population, died in the First World War. So a huge amount of grave monuments, of war memorials are needed. Every village will have one, every town will have one, lots of individual ones are needed. So the next 10 years, sculptures are flat out just doing monuments to the dead, which is, in a way, it's one of the greatest public arts commissions there's ever been in human history, probably, the First World War monuments in Europe. On the other hand, it does rather box you in as an artist if that's all you have to do for the next 10 years, monument after monument after monument after monument. Yeah, this is typical Edinburgh cemetery. Here's a style of graves, beautiful views of the mountains of Edinburgh behind, that's why I choose it. First one is not a soldier, first one is a reverend here, minister, priest of the Church of Scotland. For 50 years he, by the looks of him, ruled his parish with an iron rod. There's a rather rich parish of Campbelltown on the west coast. Campbelltown, famous for whiskies. Famous whiskies used to come from Campbelltown, and here the Reverend George Walter Strang. That church, by the way, he built himself for 50 years. Like I say, he was a minister, and he got a nice memorial from the parish once he died. This portrait here, that is Van Indernaert-Bo's portrait of the Reverend Strang. Here we can see it. Most of the memorial is probably done by Charles Henshaw and Sons, which is a bronze caster. The surround, for instance, here, the frame, I've seen them in many monuments in many churches. That's an identikit thing they used again and again and again. The letters, probably Henshaw did that as well, but we can see there's a sort of insert of the portrait, and the portrait is definitely by Van Indernaert-Bosch. Quite a formidable looking priest, I have to say. Yeah, one of the things about war memorials is that they are quite standardized, extremely standardized when it comes to the Commonwealth war graves memorials. You've got Sir Edwin Lutyens, quite famous in India, Delhi and all that, New Delhi. He designed the standard stone for British First World War, British and Commonwealth First World War gravestones. And that is a very elegant but very simple stone, which is the same for everyone. Doesn't matter whether you're here, Durga, the mess waiter, Royal Indian Army Service Corps, or whether you're a field marshal, everybody gets the same style stone. Doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, whatever. I've seen Buddhist gravestones in Edinburgh, for instance, as well. They all get the same stone. Different symbols for regiments, different symbols for religions, fair enough, but different scripts if you want. But the stone is the same. Every soldier is the same once they're dead. And then you've got, by Sir Reginald Bloomfield, you see that again everywhere in the world, on the peaks of Hong Kong and the swamps of Australia, here in India. This is Bhawanipur. These two examples here from Bhawanipur, or in Edinburgh, in English villages, wherever you see them, this cross of sacrifice. It's different in size depending on how many people are buried in the cemetery. It's got more steps, it's got fewer steps, but the design is always the same, to say that in death every soldier is the same. But that's only for the actual war graves. What the rest of the world does is up to them. And cities put up war memorials. These are some examples, famous examples from here in Kolkata. We've got, just last year, I went to the rededication here for the 100th anniversary, the Lascar War Memorial in Hastings, the Navy War Memorial. The Navy did a great show there after restoring. That's quite Indian in style. There's quite a lot of Indian architectural features went into that. It's for the Indian Navy soldiers. Then you've got the British Memorial, the Cenotaph, very much inspired by the Cenotaph in London. That's top of Red Road in the Maidan, opposite Government House and the Netaji statue. And then you've got, not many people know that, I've got the feeling, quite small, don't be fooled, the person in the background is just very far away. It's not a huge memorial at all. It's in College Square. That's a Bengali memorial for the Bengali soldiers who died in the First World War on the British side. There's in Chandanagar, I think there's another one for the ones who were in the French army. This is just examples, and the same diversity of monuments you've got back in the UK, and especially in Scotland. You've got companies, clubs, etc., who put on memorials. You've got William Younger, it's a famous brewery. 80 of the men die in the war, so they put up a memorial and they ask Van Indernaal Boos to do it. The brewery is cleared away now, it's closed down, but the monument went to the local church. So this is Van Indernaal Boos' work on that. We've got another bigger commission for Perthshire, a county in the centre of Scotland, where together with Robert Stoddard Lorimer, so Robert Lorimer is a huge name in Scottish architecture. He does the building work, and Van Indernaal Boos does the artwork. And we can see what they did. Here we've got the plaster maquette on the one side, the sepia picture, that's the plan. And then rather better even than the plan is the actual outcome. That's the County War Memorial, where every year in November the ceremonies are held for Remembrance Day. As you can see, the red wreaths laid down. And the work Boos did here is the artistic work. He did the plants, he did the angels in the corner, and he did the statue here of St. John the Baptist, the St. John the Baptist Church. So he is guarding the entrance to this here. That's his biggest work. That's life-size, the statue of St. John the Baptist. And that's very unusual because usually he worked small scale. That's the only life-size statue we've got. We've got an example here on the side of Goscombe John from 1899, which could have been a bit of an inspiration, but his own is really quite different and quite inspired by Rodin as well. The texture in the fur which St. John the Baptist seems to wear here. Again, it's quite tragic because it was unveiled in September 26, and in August 26, Van Indernaal Boos has already died. So he was certainly not there at the unveiling of the statue, of the shrine and everything like that. He already missed that. But we don't even know whether he saw this coming out of the oven, so to speak, coming out of the furnace at the thing. He might only ever seen the plaster model for it, which is quite tragic. His biggest work, if not his greatest work, arguably. He never lived to see it, sadly, Van Indernaal Boos. Yeah, the angels, quite interesting, the angels. At first, the central angel, that's the one from the shrine, looks straightforward, neo-medieval, neo-Gothic, and he certainly studied, we know from his time in Paris. On the right side, we see that he studied here, that is from the cathedral in Amiens. It's Eve with the serpent, and certainly you can see the influence going across. But also you can see the work he did in Baroda, the temple work, which is in the art gallery in Baroda, which again, if you compare that with the other two, they could all three be sisters in a way, couldn't they? This is just the way his artistic style, his artistic thoughts developed from his studies as a student in Paris to his middle work in India, very much an Indian subject, but it's not that different from his neo-medieval work for the War Memorial in the end. It just shows how he could swivel his focus with the technique to various subjects and how much he learned from the past and how much he managed to reuse that and creatively use that by modifying it for the present. Another work, my personal favorite, is the War Memorial in Ormiston, a small mining town near Edinburgh, about 3/4 of an hour by bus from central Edinburgh. And that he uses this sacrifice of use that is made for that monument at standing outside. The Miners' Institute is kind of a social club, like you've got in towns like Asansol, and so you've got a railway institute where people go for dances and for lectures and social committee meetings and stuff like this. Miners had the same institutes in the mining towns southeast of Edinburgh, and this is Ormiston, you can see here, standing there on top of the plinth. The plinth is not his work, he did the bronze work on top, the statuette sacrifice of use. Lots of names, small village, but more than 50 people died in the war, so that's why everybody needed memorials. Bit more of a close-up from the side, and equally impressive from the back. And if it reminds you of anything, think of that, the Age of Bronze, Rodin's Age of Bronze, which he was impressed with as a young traveling artist in Paris, which he sketched so very well. So again, it's not similar, it's not by any means a copy, but it shows his inspiration and it shows his skill, because that's not, that's not a million miles different, especially if you see what other people were doing at the same time. Here, for instance, Percy Portsmouth, his teacher. What was he doing at the time? We can see the monument in Cerso. That is a traditional looking sculpture. There is nothing very modern about that. And we can see how many he did. I mean, it's just like as an example here, in 2 years he did like 5 major monuments, war memorials. That's how busy sculptors were in those days, just more war memorial after war memorial. And underneath the grey picture, we can also see why maybe it might not have been an unalloyed joy for artists to work on war memorials. Because you see, there are an awful lot of people around there with an awful lot of important looking hats and uniforms, and every one of them will have an opinion on what you're doing. And they won't just have an opinion after you've left and you can throw the newspaper in the bin, but they'll have an opinion before, in the committee meeting, and who gets the job, where is it going to place. Once they've decided that, there'll be fundraising meetings. Oh, for this kind of monument, we can get that of money. But if you get a bit more traditional, maybe we can raise a bit more money. Then there'll be people who say, why spend money on all that money which we've raised on a monument anyway? I mean, our part of Edinburgh, we spend the money on a hospital instead. Might be a better idea than having lots of money giving to an artist and a building contractor for lots of marble and bronze, Again, debate after debate after debate, endless committee meetings. And, maybe that's why Bose didn't do quite so many of them. He's only got 2 war memorials. And maybe that's why he didn't want to do the Scottish National War Memorial, because, again, endless sitting in committees, making compromises. And he probably thought the same would be happening with the Victoria Memorial. He probably was a young man who wanted to do his art, wanted to be left alone doing it. He didn't want tons of people telling him, oh yeah, maybe the arm like this, maybe the arm like this, maybe drape him over, maybe don't have the boy quite so naked, it's a bit shocking for the older ladies. Maybe that's why he backed out of all these big committee-type projects, Because there's an awful lot of people, and these people have very, very strong feelings, because remember, every single one of them has probably lost a father, a brother, a husband, maybe their only son. These people are really fired up. They've got opinions, and they feel very, very strongly about what should happen, because they're very, very emotionally involved. It's a minefield, war memorials. Yeah, the biggest war memorials, again, we can see on the right side what Percy Portsmouth is. Enormous statues here. The Scottish National War Memorial. Pretty much everybody who was a colleague of Van Indernat Bose was involved in this. There's a huge amount of work. Again, there's a question of why he wasn't. Maybe he didn't want to. There's even a separate section here for the Indian Army. I mean, it's called the Scottish National War Memorial. Strictly speaking, if you look inside, yes, it's Scottish regiments which recruited soldiers who self-identified as Scottish, let's say. I mean, there's Liverpool Scottish Regiment, there's a London Scottish Regiment, there's Canadian Scottish Regiment, there's Australian Scottish Regiment. Like I say, there's the Indian Army has got its own shrine in there. Most of the Indian Army probably weren't Scots, let's face it. But some of the officers were, so they get their own shrine there. But they called it the Scottish National War Memorial. Why don't they just call it the War Memorial for Scotland? But no, Scottish National War Memorial. We are again here with the thing is, what is art? Is art universal, or is art for a war memorial? Does it have to be Scottish? Does it have to be national? And again, how does William Goscombe John? He's Welsh. He's not Scottish. He's not national. Van Indernat Bose, he spent a lot of time in Scotland. Is he Scottish enough to work on this? No, I don't know. It's not a British war memorial. It's a Scottish war memorial. Another interesting one of the what-ifs, had he been involved in the Scottish National War Memorial, what would he have done for them? Another thing is the William Cree Memorial Chapel. Sadly, no good pictures. Got a bit of an aerial photo here. Some ruins on the bottom and the modern church. It's basically a large landowner, rich wine dealer who retired, got some old cottages, turned them into a community hall, and once he died, it was supposed to be turned into a memorial chapel for him. It's very close to an area which Van Indernaert Boos knew very well. Peeblesshire, where this is an area where there's quite a lot of interesting modern architects by rich Edinburgh people who've got their summer houses there. Lord Carmichael, I've already mentioned, Governor of Bengal, who had a summer house not far from there, which is an amazing arts and crafts wooden house with lots of interesting metalwork on it. And certainly this chapel gets quite a lot of interesting artists coming in. Douglas Strachan, a big stained glass artist, makes a beautiful stained glass window for this chapel. But Van Indernaert Boos isn't there because Van Indernaert Boos is already died. Just as an idea what could have been, you know, if they'd commissioned him to do a door like Rodin's Gates to Hell, that would have been an amazing entrance for this memorial chapel. But, you know, it's one of these what-ifs. Probably wouldn't have happened anyway, but it's nice dreaming of it, what Van Indernaert Boos could have done with that chapel. Because 1st of August, yes, beautiful landscape here. He dies at Leverlaw Cottage at 11 a.m. in the morning of cardiac arrest, probably of anginal nature. The obituary says, a keen and skillful angler, he overtaxed his strength on a fishing visit to Peeblesshire. And we can see on the map here, Leverlaw is right at the bottom, and slightly above is this church, which is the memorial chapel. And we can see the valley where he stayed, and the little burn here, as we call it in Scotland, the brook, the little river, where he probably went for his angling. So that's what did for him, the Bengali love for fish. Sad, but very early, he wasn't even 40, he was 38 only when he died there on this fishing expedition. Death certificates. Funeral. Yes, it says he's buried in an unmarked grave. Well, that's no great shame. Most Christians are buried in unmarked graves because the stonemason doesn't know ahead when you're going to die, so by definition the stone is not ready yet when you go into the grave, so it's unmarked. Slightly different here is that it was left unmarked because the family, I believe, emigrated shortly afterwards, so nobody was there to look after the grave, so no stone was put up. But it wasn't like a Mozart situation where he was buried in the dead of night with hardly anybody there. So his funeral was very, very well attended. He has sort of many fellows of the Royal Scottish Academy was there. Sir Robert Lorimer, a big fish in Scottish architecture, was there. Percy Portsmouth, his teacher, was there. Alexander Carrick, one a very famous sculptor in Scotland. You can see on the right this freedom fighter here, William Wallace. Millions of people see that statue every day. It's right by the entrance of Edinburgh Castle. You've got Pilkington Jackson, again a contemporary of Van Indernaert Boos. That is one of the most famous statues in Edinburgh, the blue sky background there. That's a freedom fighter, Robert the Bruce, who liberated Scotland from England in medieval times. And that statue was so famous it ended up on the £20 banknote in Scotland even. So that is quite a feat for a sculptor to end up with his work on a permanent banknote, not just a commemorative one, but that is general circulation £20 banknote in Scotland. And you can see all these people who turn up, Lorimer, Carrick, Jackson. They are all artists who are famous for being sculptors, but who are also famous for being Scottish. If you see a Robert Lorimer house, you know it cannot stand in Norfolk or in London or in Cornwall. You know it is Scottish because Robert Lorimer, in a way, it's kind of the Abanindranath Bose, Abanindranath Tagore of Scottish architecture. He goes back to the roots of Scottish architecture, medieval architecture, and he brings it into modern, at his time, early 20s, late 90s, early 20th centuries building, and you can see a Lorimer building is always Scottish. It might have all the modern amenities and stuff like this, but it is Scottish, extremely Scottish, and the same with Carrick and with Jackson. It's all on Scottish themes. So where, in a way, the Scottish versions of the Bengal school has caught up with Van Indernaert Boos here. Only they are not Bengalis, they are now proud Scottish people who said Scottish art has to go back to its roots, Scottish art has to be that. And we've got Van Indernaert Boos. What does he think about it? We don't know. Whether he's still saying, look, artists are just artists. Just be an artist, do art. Forget about all this nationalism business. If you follow your roots too far, where do you end up? You end up under the ground, don't you? If you go roots, 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 roots. In the end, you'll be under the earth. Should you, as an artist, not look at the branches, look at the leaves, and maybe, if you're lucky, generate some fruit for further generations? On the other hand, you can't do any fruits, leaves, branches if you don't have roots. So, it's the eternal conundrum. What do you do? Do you go too much in the past? Do you go too far in the future and fall off a cliff with nobody understanding what you do? And that's one of the, I guess it's the dilemma in every artist's life, but it certainly was a dilemma in Fanindranath Bose's life. Yes, how is he commemorated? At first, not at all. He's very quickly forgotten, I'm afraid. The family emigrates. There's nobody who greatly speaks out for him. Other artists have got their own work to promote. Naturally, they liked him probably as a friend, but we don't really know. So he's pretty much forgotten for most of the rest of the century, pretty much all the rest of the century. It's 2011 we get the first story again when the Royal Scottish Academy suddenly realized, we used to have this Indian. He was the first Indian. Amazing. Let's see what we've got. Nothing. They didn't have anything in Edinburgh of Fanindranath Bose. It had all gone. So they got a bit of money and they said, let's buy something. I mean, we owe the guys that much that we have at least one piece of work there. So they managed to get a portrait bust. His output wasn't huge. He died young. Even when he was alive, he didn't constantly churn out things. So there's not an awful lot on the market to buy, but they managed to get this, the portrait bust. Not sure whether it's 26, it might be earlier. Then Kenny Munro, a sculptor in Edinburgh who's got quite a lot of connections with Calcutta as well. He does quite a lot of art projects here to do also with Patrick Geddes, the town planner, public artist from Edinburgh who was very closely involved with Shantiniketan, who was very closely involved with Rabindranath Tagore and so on, did town planning at the university over in Mumbai. He does projects here in Kolkata as well. And he managed to find his grave at least and put a temporary marker on here, a nice little marble plaque. That was 2013. University got interested. The university students had a project finding colonial links in the university student body and staff. So they found out, Fanindranath Bose, who is he? They found out about him and did research work on him. They dug up quite a bit about him. Uncover Edinburgh, that was one of the things. Lectures were held, so I haven't filled in anything here. And then a big scoop, the Galloway family, the family of Fanindranath Bose's wife. They never had any children, by the way, so there aren't any direct descendants. They contact the RSA and they donate their entire archive to the Royal Scottish Academy. And that was a big scoop, because now they could start an exhibition. And in late 24, early 25, I went to it. Somewhat confusingly, it's called Ben O'Shots, and it's got miscellany, because they had various artists, a long list here, all artists who came from abroad to Scotland and made their career in Scotland. And Ben O'Shots is a very famous example there. But yeah, here's Ben O'Shots. The work of Ben O'Shots. He was a teacher in Glasgow School of Art, very famous. We can see him here. In the middle, we can see a self-portrait. We can see how Ben O'Shots' style also develops. He was a bit younger than Bose, but still more or less a contemporary. And there's quite a lot of coincidences, because it was Shots who Bose beat to the post at the Royal Scottish Academy when they had that vote. Remember, Shots got 8 votes, but Bose got 31. Shots also married a Scottish woman. His wife was called Millie. Bose's wife was called Molly. And most intriguingly, Shots also studied naval engineering and sculpture. So maybe the idea that Fanindranath Bose did both sculpture and naval engineering at the same time isn't as crazy as it sounds, because we definitely know Ben O'Shots did it. Roughly the same time as well as Fanindranath Bose did. So another one who came to Scotland for a sensible job. Naval engineering. Scotland was a main hub in the world in those days, and then got sidetracked into art very much. He never did, and I did a bit of draftsmanship. Yes, but about a third of the exhibition was actually Fanindranath Bose, even though the name on top of it was Ben O'Shots. They had the certificate there. They had a couple of statues. The hunter was brought over from Wales. Personal effects, notebooks, the sketchbooks were on display. On the wall there was a good example of his Paris drawings. Lots of photos, all donated by the family of the work, which he submitted for various exhibitions at the Royal Scottish Academy. So that's quite a find, and it was a very, very good exhibition. The first time in slightly less than 100 years that everybody had really taken notice of Fernindranand Bose in his chosen hometown of Edinburgh. So it's a great thing that we finally got that. Now, 2026, you notice 1st of August 1926 he died. Now 1st of August is his first centenary of his death, and there's quite a lot of people in Edinburgh who are raising money, thinking of projects of what to do. There's the Scottish Centre Tagore studies. Barshabi Fraser is to some extent still behind that. The Consul General of India has been interested. A friend of ours, Subramanian Badra, is working on things about this. He's very into art and music and promoting Indian and Bengali culture in Edinburgh, working collaboratively with lots of other people. And obviously the sculptor Kenny Monroe, who's been on the case since 2013 already, who has got big India-Bengal links and who is proposing a memorial here. Because the grave, like I said, long time it was unmarked, then Kenny put on a plaque, and now it's unmarked again because somebody came and stole the plaque. I guess there's a good resale value and nice, especially this green marble is very sacred in Scotland, so you get a good resale value of it, and somebody came at night and took it away. So we have to put on a new monument now, especially for the 100th anniversary, and Kenny is proposing that. It's very different, I have to say, from Fernindranand Bose's work. There's a lot of symbolism here. There's different types of granite who are going to be sourced from both India and Scotland to show this thing. There's this sort of zigzag thing which symbolizes this torn nature maybe between the culture and things like that. And again, how do you do monuments? I mean, it would have been easier and to the average person maybe more aesthetically pleasing to just take a copy of one of Fernindranand Bose's works and chase it through a 3D printer and get a resin copy, put it on a standard prints from B&Q and be done with it. Question is it art? And I think all of us in this room know it isn't. And would it have been what Fernindranand Bose would have wanted? Obviously he's dead, we don't know. We don't even know how his style was developed. If you've seen some of the earlier architects, their style in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and Bose could have easily lived to that age, was radically different from what it was in the 1915s, 1925s. So, I think a fitting monument is what's needed. It needs to be an artwork, and I think that would be a fitting tribute to Fernindranand Bose in Edinburgh, who is such an influential, if sadly for a long time forgotten person in our city. Right, thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much all for turning out, and thank you very much for listening to me somewhat inexpertly talking about for probably too long. I didn't time myself, sorry about that. So yes, I don't know, is there question and answers? Like I say, my capacity to answer question is limited, but if people want to, I'll try my best. No? Okay, well, I'll be sitting around. Oh, yeah. All right, okay. Well, that's...
Hello. So, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I must say just one small piece of query that majority of the works, means all the works that we have seen today, are modeling works, means modeling, then casting, means bronze casting, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm?
So how do we take it? Means was carving not so popular that during that period of time, or maybe somehow Bose was not trained in carving as such? Means did you find any clue on this?
I have to admit, no, but I've never heard of him carve as such. It was always, from what we've seen from the photos, like I say, from one of the examples, it all seems to be starting off with plaster and then going into the bronze casting process. Sadly, a lot of the bronze casters themselves, we don't know where they are. So very often we've only got, well, we haven't even got a plaster cast, we've got photos of the plaster cast, like the snake charmer, which was held up with various strings and supports and stuff, so the arms don't break off and things like that. So I think that seems to have been his process of working, as far as I know. I've never heard of him carving as such. Maybe if we look into Portsmouth, how he did things, maybe he taught him that, or maybe it's a question of the scale in which he was working, that plaster was just quicker. Usually he was working at sort of this kind of scale. Like I say, there's only one life-size statue. Yeah, sorry. Hmm?
Anyways, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay.
Anyone else? Any question?
Oh, well, I'm glad Ferdinand Bose is a little bit better known in Kolkata as well now. So, yes, like I say, he's probably not just in Edinburgh that he was a bit forgotten about. Okay. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
so
your
much, sir. Can we have a huge round of applause? And I would request the entire department to kind of come on stage for an official photograph,
All right, good. I'll
which
stay
is
up.
a custom we have in our department.
Some of you can sit in front. তোরা কয়েকজন সামনে একটু বসে যা।
সাথে
We're not entirely sure how much. Some people say he was